Welcome to another episode of the Supernaturals podcast. This one is very special as we have a international best-selling author on as a guest.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome
J.D. Barker. However, before we get to that, we just want to say, we've already done the interview, so this is before, but it is very conversation.
Yeah, it is. It's a good conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's a very nice conversation to have with somebody that knows the field of writing inside and out. And not only that, but is honestly groundbreaking when it comes to thriller writing, horror writing, all that jazz, because he's worked with James Patterson, who's also a masterclass in that. And it honestly is just, it was a fun interview. And
yeah, it was a great time.
Conversation.
Seemed like just a good guy all around.
Yeah.
And, I hope you guys enjoy our conversation with him. And if you're a writer out there, hopefully this helps you and you gain something from it. But after that, let's run the intro and get into the interview.
And yeah, I'm going here.
If your power goes out, remain.
Welcome to the graveyard.
Everyone in the theater went, oh!
No, I don't smoke cigs.
You can't just sit down and watch it.
Take personal security precautions to avoid becoming a victim of an attack.
This is the Supernaturals podcast on the SPN network.
So today we welcome a guest whose work has gripped millions of readers around the world. He's the best-selling author of some of the most chilling thrillers in modern fiction, including The Fourth Monkey, which we have right here. He has collaborated with legendary author James Patterson on multiple best-selling novels, and his stories are known for blending psychological tension, dark mystery, and the kind of suspense that keeps readers turning pages long past midnight. We're excited to not only talk about his writing journey and how it all began, but also the experiences that shaped his voice, his collaborations, and maybe even a few darker subjects along the way. Please welcome J.D. Barker to the show.
Welcome. Thank you for being on. Great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, Cal and I, we talk a lot on this podcast and this show, and we really don't go very surface level or very deep at all. We tend to keep it very, very surface level, kind of about our lives and stuff like that. And we've talked about our love lives, our love interests a couple times, but we really try to keep it to the topic of horror, which our fans love and we love to talk about. But we don't really dive into like kind of how we got there, our past, or anything about that. And we're interested really to see and hear kind of how your life was before you became an author.
Well, that's kind of a long story. Let me see if I can shorten this a little bit. So when I grew up, we did have a TV in the house. So I was hitting the library and reading at a very, very early age, and fell in love with books. And I've got a sister who's 15 months younger than me. So I used to, make up little short stories. I would staple them. I created a library in my room. She would check them out. I would charge her late fees, so like this dates way back. And my mom always encouraged, the writing aspect of it, but she would tell me, that writing is a fantastic hobby, but you can't make a living at it. You have to get a real job when you grow up. And she drilled that into my head. So I did what I was expected to do. I finished up high school, went off to college. I got a couple degrees, ended up working in finance. Hated every minute of it, but that's what you're supposed to do. Now on the side, I was working as a writer. When I was in college, I worked for BMG Distribution, which is like a division of RCA Records. I was essentially a glorified babysitter in the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. So if they had a recording artist come into town, I'd have to pick pick them at the airport, get them to their hotel, get them to their concert, get them to the radio stations for their interviews. If you've ever seen that movie, Get Them to the Greek, that was essentially my life back then.
Wow.
And I was in school, which was very expensive. And I quickly realized I've got some very famous people, in a car with me, sometimes for days at a time. So I started to interview them, and I would take those interviews and turn them into, sell them to like Teen Beat and Tiger Beat and People Magazine and whatever I could to generate some income on the side. So that was kind of like my little side hustle introduction to the writing world. And when you work for newspapers and magazines, you quickly realize everybody that you're working with, they've all got a novel at some stage of development in a desk drawer somewhere. It's 400,000 words long. They've been working on it for the last 10 years. It's almost done. Just needs a little something. I became the guy that they would show those to. So I would help them with grammar and punctuation, and that turned into helping with story edits and developmental stuff. And after a while, it turned into a side hustle as a book doctor and a ghostwriter, basically rewriting those books and getting to the point where an agent would take them and an editor would buy them. So I would come home after working in finance all day, and I would do this kind of stuff at night because this is what I actually enjoyed to do. And I did this for 23 years. The job during the daytime that I hated, the writing stuff at night that I loved. And over those 23 years, I had 6 different books that hit the New York Times list that all came out with other people's names on the cover that I had essentially written, which gets really old after a while. So number 6 hit up. My wife pulled me aside. She said, listen, I know you want to become a full-time author. Let's figure out how to make this happen. But at this point, I was kind of stuck because I was a chief compliance officer at a brokerage firm. I had a really good salary, and we had all the trappings of that. We had a big house, we had cars, we had a boat. So I couldn't just walk away from the job because we had to pay for this lifestyle. So my wife came up with this crazy plan. We sold everything that we owned. We bought a tiny little duplex in Pittsburgh for cash. We rented out one side to some tenants, and we moved into the other side and basically got our expenses down to the point where I could live off of savings long enough to write that first book. And nothing like putting your feet to the coals to really, get things going. There was no plan B. I had to succeed as an author, or there was no plan B.
You know, it's funny. You're not the first person that said that, nor will you be the last, because we have that similar situation kind of going on in our lives right now too, where he doesn't have a plan B. Yeah. I'm in the route and the job of I'm just working my 9 to 5 every day, and then we come home and grind on our passion, our love, and what we want our career to be, right? So it's so fascinating that everyone that we've talked to so far has just brought that up, and it's all or nothing, and it tends to work out usually for those that put everything in.
I was just going to say, yeah, the people who say they don't have a plan B are usually the ones who actually succeed. Yeah. At least from my experience of asking. But yeah, it's like, I feel like, yeah, if you have one foot already out of the door, something to fall back on, you might not be fully in on something. And yeah, so I respect that completely.
Yeah, I think some of it came from, I interviewed Madonna years back, and like she arrived in New York with $10 in her pocket, like got off the bus with $10, and like that was it. Like she knew she had to make it, or she was just done. And like just that mindset is huge. And when you talk to people, and it could be any industry, it doesn't matter what they're doing. The top people all tend to have a story like that. Like they don't fail because it's just that failure is just not an option.
Exactly.
Yeah. Grinded till you succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those years go by too. I mean, I was 42 when we decided to do all of this, and I'd been writing for 20 some years already at that point. And I started thinking, I started seeing myself on a porch, 80 years old in a rocking chair, thinking, what if, because like those years feel like they just flying by so fast, like that's going to just happen. And I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to have to look back on the whole life and say, well, I could have tried this, but I didn't. Yeah. I think you have to pull the trigger on it.
Yeah. Do you remember like a certain point when writing kind of went from like, okay, this is, something that I'd like to do, to like, this is something that I was put on this planet to do? Was there like a certain story that you were writing or something like that, or one of the, or was it just that experience, I guess, from writing all the other books, I guess, that you...
I think it really came from that, and because I was working with a lot of people in New York, editors at all the big top publishing houses, and they were constantly telling me what they needed to see in a best-selling book, what they wanted me to do to it, what they wanted me to take out, what they wanted me to put in, and the fact that I was able to deliver that. Well, I got a phone call coming in.
Oh, you're good.
Sorry about that. So I was able to deliver on all that. And, they started pointing that out there, and I started hearing more and more like, you should probably be doing this on your own. Like, and I didn't feel like I was ready. I didn't feel like I could take that step away from the guaranteed paycheck. It's a very difficult, move to make. But, I knew I had to do it at some point, and just that voice got loud enough where I didn't have a choice anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, where I have such a steady paycheck, and it's going to be hard to give that up for a dream right now. But it's true, you will have to. And I think it's just cool to hear that same perspective across many people.
Yeah.
There's honestly, there's different ways to do it. I mean, if you can sock some money away from that job, and build up a nest egg and get to the point where you can take a break from it and possibly do something like that, that's one route. Even when I started selling books, like I wasn't sure if it was going to continue. So instead of taking those royalty checks and advance checks and putting them in the bank and just spending them, my wife and I bought real estate. And we lived off the money that the real estate generated. We never actually touched that principal balance. So in today's world, we're living, 100% on passive income from other things. Yeah. We don't spend any of the writing money that comes in. Working in finance, I guess that was a bonus. I got to see what, some of the wealthier people in the world, how they handle money. And it's very different from the way the rest of us do it, because like we're kind of, it's, I don't want to go off on a rant here, but like, when you go off to college, you go in for your enrollment period, and the credit card companies are right there. They sign you up, like they want you to get into debt straight off the bat. They want you to get a student loan. And I think a lot of that stuff forces you down that path. You have to go down that route. Then you have to get a job to pay for those things. Then you get a mortgage, you hit these certain benchmarks that other people want you to hit. But that's not necessarily the right way to do it. I live on an island now. It's one of the wealthiest zip codes in New Hampshire. And there's not a brand new car on this island. Every single person out here buys used cars. They're all millionaires, but they buy used cars. That says something. I think that's what the rest of us should be doing. Because I had a lot of friends in high school that had no problem, with a $500 a month car payment, just to have that brand new truck or whatever sit in their driveway. But like that was literally their only asset, and everything they did was to work for it.
Yep. The more and more money I make, the more and more I try to act like I still don't have it.
That's what you need to do,
Yeah, I have this thing where like if I get to a certain benchmark when it comes to like money, I don't want to drop below that benchmark, otherwise I like start to like have an existential crisis. So I get that. I absolutely understand that.
I've got this spreadsheet that I made when I first started selling books that basically takes all the monthly expenses and income and puts it all together. And then based on savings, it tells me how many months we have left to live before we're broke. And I watched that number very closely in the very beginning. And I still see it every month. I mean, now it's way out there, but it's, I still track it every day.
Yeah. So in terms of publishing, I want to talk about, because I mean, I myself have, I like to write as well. I have self-published 3 novels, but I have to say, like, I had no idea like how big of I thought that writing the book was, the hardest part. It's definitely not. It's trying to figure out, how do I get this thing published? How do I get this thing out into the world? And so I guess what my question is like, we have fans who send us stuff sometimes, and they, it's little short stories here and there, and they're pretty talented, but it's like, I basically want to know if there's somebody who's starting out now, how exactly would they start that path of getting something published?
Yeah, so whenever I run into a new author, I always encourage them to take the traditional route first. Go out there, try to get an agent, try to get a publisher. I think those gatekeepers are very important for one particular reason. They're going to say no to you. And a lot of times, I think it's important to not only hear a no, but to understand why you're getting a no. So if you send a book out to a bunch of different agents, they all reject you, try to find out why they're rejecting you. A lot of times there is a problem with that book. And if you talk to them about it, they will tell you what the problem is. And a lot of times you can fix fix it and you can get it right. What I see a lot of people do, which I consider to be a mistake, is they'll query 40, 50, 60 agents. They get all these rejections and then they say, oh, I'm just going to self-publish. But they don't change anything. They don't address the fact that all these people rejected it for a reason. So they take the book, they put it out on Amazon, they hit that publish button, then their friends and family, review it. So they get 10, 20, 5-star reviews. And then all of a sudden the real readers find it. And all of a sudden they start pointing out the flaws in this book. And that, review average goes from 4.5 to 3 to 3.5 to 2.5. Before you know it, you're sitting at 2 million in the Amazon store. You're not selling any copies. And if anybody looks you up, that's your legacy. They see your book out there at a 2.5-star rating. So even if you write something else, like that's what you're competing with. Nobody's going to buy your second book if your first one didn't sell. They could, but like it's such an uphill battle. So I always encourage everybody to try and tweak that book, get it as perfect as possible. I don't think a book should be put out in the world unless it's a 5-star read. Somehow you need to get it there for the reason that you just pointed out. Like you have to have the perfect book before you even start to sell it. And then you need a marketing plan behind all that. I've noticed over the years, I can put a lot of money into advertising for a book. I can buy Facebook ads, Amazon ads. I can do all those things. I advertise on television. And if I throw dollars at the marketing side, I can sell books that way. But the second that I turn that off, the book sales will dry up unless that book has word of mouth. If the book is good enough, somebody's going to read it. They're going to tell 3 of their friends, and then those 3 people are going to run out and, they're going to read it. They're going to tell 3 friends. That's what really keeps a book on the bestseller list. That's what really gives it longevity. Like you've got a copy of Fourth Monkey there. That book came out almost 10 years ago. It's still somewhere around 1,500 in the Amazon store, and it's regularly at the the top of those sub lists. And it's all word of mouth. There's nobody putting money behind it right now for advertising. It's just all people telling their friends, and that's what you want.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of how we discovered a lot of really good movies too. Is you're jumping through Reddit posts of just I'm looking for this type of movie tonight, and just people are suggesting things that are good. And if your product's good, people will talk about it. Like it's just gonna happen.
Social media completely changed the way that whole landscape works. I mean, if you think about a movie, coming out, they used to advertise the hell out of it on television. Everybody would go out and see it, and they would, collect revenue all weekend long. And say, if there was a bad movie, sales wouldn't really dry up until Monday, because Monday everybody went back to work, they went back to schools, they started talking to each other, and they said, oh, you don't want to see that, you don't want to see that, you don't want to see that. In today's world, the very first showing of a movie, everybody's all over social media right after. You've got Rotten Tomatoes, you've got all these things going on. Everybody knows that movie is going to succeed or fail with the very first time that it's on the screen, which is a huge driver. But that's what we're competing with, and books are no different. I think public opinion is what really works. Like I don't watch anything anymore based on commercials, but if I see a lot of people talking about it on social media, I'll pick it up. Because to me, that's my peers, that's my friends, basically telling me that, this is worthwhile or this isn't. I think that's a lot more believable than somebody putting $1 million behind an ad campaign.
Right.
I agree.
And to piggyback on the publishing thing, there's hybrid publishing too. Do you believe that's the future of literature, or is it just a new avenue for an author to take?
Well, I did that with a couple of books. So like my very first book I indie published, but I sold a lot of copies of it, which put me on the radar of the traditional guys. So when Fourth Monkey was being shopped, we ended up getting a 7-figure deal for that with a TV show and a movie attached. So I kind of saw both extremes of everything. Then my next couple of books were all traditional. I did that. That was with HarperCollins, and I did one for Putnam. I wrote a prequel to Dracula. I did a couple of traditional books. But then I had gotten a taste of being an indie author, and the economics are very different. As an indie author, you make about 70 cents on the dollar. And as a traditional author, you're lucky if you get 15 to 20 cents on the dollar. Now, they might give you a nice big advance check in the beginning of all that, but you've got to pay that money back, and you've got to sell a lot of books in order to do it. So if you start doing the math on paper, scale it out over 5 years or so, you're going to realize that you're going to make a lot more money going the indie route if you can get the sales behind you versus the traditional route. So I got about 4 or 5 books in on the traditional side, and then I called my agent, and I had a new book called A Caller's Game. And I told her, listen, I'm going to publish this in English on my own through my own press. You can go ahead and sell it to all my foreign publishers, in 150 different countries. So she was still busy, but I wanted to see what would happen if I did that. And that's what I consider to be a hybrid approach. My own press in English, then, HarperCollins over in this country. It was Random House in Germany. It was, this guy over here. So kind of a mix of all of them. But I ran into kind of the same problem that most indie authors do. I couldn't get it into every store that I wanted to get it into. I couldn't get it into Target or Walmart or Costco, the grocery stores, the airports. sorts, because it's an indie published title, in their eyes. So they don't want to do that. So if you flash forward a couple of years, about a year and a half ago, I had a book coming out called Behind a Closed Door. I ended up striking a deal with Simon & Schuster, where I created my own imprint on Simon & Schuster, and they handle my print sales and distribution. So I basically have to pay for the print runs because I'm my own publisher, no different than an indie author, but Simon & Schuster is doing the heavy lifting on the back end. And because it's in their catalog, I'm now able to get into some of those places that I couldn't get into before. I honestly see that as being the future of the whole publishing industry. I'm one of the first guys to do it through Simon & Schuster, and I think the only reason they did it is because they got recently acquired by a private equity firm. So the thinking that's happening over there from a business standpoint is very different from what used to happen over there. And I think the folks over like Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, the other top 5, they're all watching this very closely because they're realizing that it's a possible way for them to expand their business. If you go to a successful indie author and you say, I will give you $1 million to publish your next book, most of those indie authors are going to say no because they can make that millions of dollars. They can do it on their own. They don't need this publisher behind them. But if that publisher, if Random House does that as a partnership, you can still put the book out, and we're going to allow you to use our distribution system to get it out into the world, into all these places. All of a sudden, that opens up doors for everybody, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So I think that's the way that it's going to go.
Awesome. Yeah.
Pretty fascinating.
I mean, you've kind of dealt with that kind of publishing stuff yourself.
Well, it was really confusing.
Yeah.
So, no, this is all super fascinating and worth learning. So, yeah.
Yeah, you write thrillers, horror, and suspense novels. Is there any experience, book, film that kind of got you into the realm of the spooky?
It was Dracula. I grew up without a TV, so I was reading really early. I was hitting, I read all the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew mysteries. Then I started on all the classics like Charles Dickens and those guys. My mom owned an antique store, so we used to do a lot of garage sales. And I remember going to a garage sale one time, and this guy had a box of books sitting next to his desk. And sitting right on top was a copy of Dracula for 25 cents. And I picked it up, and I remember I was 8 years old. It looked scary as hell, looked like something that I shouldn't be reading. I read the back, and I was like, now I definitely want to read it. I thought my mom was going to say no, but she let me get it. So I took it home. I read it. It took me about 3 weeks to get all the way through it. But by the time that was done, I was sleeping with the lights on. I was checking under the bed. My closet door was locked with stuff stacked against it. It scared the bejesus out of me. And that was the first time I had ever gotten an emotional reaction out of a book. And I think I've been chasing that feeling ever since as not only a reader, but as a writer, trying to recreate that. So I think that's what sparked it. And that's probably what created that interest in me in horror. After that, I discovered Stephen King, and then it was off to the races.
Yeah. Now, or is there anything that still might scare you as an adult?
I just recently, my last book, it was called Something I Keep Upstairs. It's a haunted house story. It's based on a real house. I live on a little island off the coast of Portsmouth in New England. And right off our island is another little island that's very tiny. It's only about an acre. There's only one house on it. And I wrote this book about that particular house. The tagline for the story is, for a haunted house to be born, somebody has to die. So it's about a 17-year-old kid. His grandmother passes away, and she actually owns that house. And she leaves it to him along with a trust fund and a lot of money. So, at 17 years old, all of a sudden he's got this, this kid's got his own house. He's got money. He does exactly what you would expect. He turns it into a party house for him and his friends. Someplace they can go, get away from the parents, get away from the police, and kind of spend their last summer together before they all go off to college. But partying gets old after a little while, and somebody raises their hand and says, hey, what would it take to turn this house into a haunted house? So they start exactly where you would expect. There's a couple of scary stories, and somebody brings a Ouija board. But the tagline for the book is always there in the back of your mind: for a haunted house to be born, somebody has to die. So you know where the story is going, but it's that journey getting there that makes it fun and makes it scary. And by keeping it real like that, making it something that could happen in real life, I think that's what makes it the most frightening. Stephen King, I've read as a fan, and then I've gone back through with the highlighter and torn apart his books to try and figure out why they work. And the reason they work is he can take something that seems completely incredible and turn it into something that feels like it could happen to you. And that's the key to it. That's the key to the scariest stuff. Anybody can write a vampire novel, but Stephen King wrote a zombie novel as Pet Sematary. He made it believable. And that's what you need to do, I think, as a horror author.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and we also did hear that you held a contest for that house as well, didn't you?
We did, yeah. So I'm really big on marketing. Whenever I've got a book coming out, I always make a list of what I see everybody else doing to sell their books, and then I try to come up with something completely outside the box that nobody's doing. So I had this book about a haunted house, a real house. So we ended up creating a contest where we allowed one person to stay in that house with 3 of their friends for 24 hours. So we literally took them. You can only get to it by boat. You can only get to it at certain times of the day because the tide's got to be high. So we took these 4 people in a boat, dropped them off on this haunted island, left them for 24 hours, and we'll be back. Luckily, nobody died. But from a marketing standpoint, this was huge because when was the last time an author has ever done that? It's never happened. Yeah. So I did a ton of television spots and radio spots. This author is giving away an overnight stay in a haunted house. People were talking about it on social media, like, I'll do it. I won't do it. I'm not going to do it. I'll do it if you do it. But everybody was chatting about it, and all of that was free. You can't beat that. So I'm always looking for that type of angle, something just a little different to sell those books. The problem with that is you can only do each thing one time. Right. Somebody else could go out there and try to do the same thing. It's not going to hit as hard. You've got to come up with something original every single time.
And way to be the first.
Yeah, a lot of that comes from working with James Patterson. When he first wrote Along Came a Spider, the sales on it were okay, but they weren't where they wanted them to be. And he worked for a marketing company in New York. So he said, listen, I'm going to create my own television spot. And nobody was doing TV spots for books back then. They barely do it today. But he spent $500 of his own money, and he created a little ad. And I still remember it. It basically said, I think the voiceover was, your wait for the next Silence of the Lambs is over. And then a little spider starts to creep down from the corner of the screen, and then it lights up with Along Came a Spider. But that ad is what lit up his book sales and caused that book to hit the bestseller list. So if he hadn't have done that, we might not have a James Patterson today.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Horror obviously is our favorite genre, as you can tell.
Yeah.
But I personally love found footage films. I think they're so fun, and they really get you into the headspace of, I'm in this with them, which is really cool. I know Cal loves slashers.
I'm a classic slasher guy. Yeah.
And it's so funny. There's so many subgenres and categories of horror that you can dive into. And sometimes at night, we go onto Shudder or Reddit and try and find movies, and you're just blown away with the amount of content and creativeness that's just online, which is already crazy, which also makes it hard to kind of stand out in the creative world itself as well. And, I think I just love looking through all the catalogs of different genres. And how does an author or even filmmaker or whatever, just someone creative, find their voice in this whole realm?
It's a crowded field for sure.
It is.
Yeah, I just heard that 4 million books were published in 2025. That's insane. If you go back a couple of years, it was like 1 or 2 million. And of that 4 million, 600,000 were traditionally published. So, over 3 million were indie published. A lot of that was probably AI generated, which is another elephant in the room right now that's crowding the space. All you can really do is create the best possible product that you can, and try to find some way to stand out. Like the cream of the crop always rises. The best books always seem to find their way to the top. I think that's what you have to shoot for. Again, I look for angles, something different that nobody else is doing. You can go on, Facebook and, read all these, Facebook groups talking about marketing. You're going to find that all these authors are all doing the same thing. And a lot of authors will say, okay, that's what I'm supposed to be doing too. And that will work to a certain extent. But if they're all right here, that means you're never going to get past that. You're going to get stuck there. Yeah. You need something that's going to take you up here. That's how you get to that top, list on the various charts. I think problem is, I think a lot of authors just they can't put on 2 different hats. You're either creative from a writing standpoint or you're creative from a marketing standpoint. There's very few people out there that can actually do both. And I think if that's you as an author, you need to find somebody who can do it and pair up with somebody else, whether that means bringing on a partner, hiring a company, whatever you've got to do, but you've got to fill that void somehow.
So, is that how the collaboration with James Patterson began, or how did that even happen? like insane.
Yeah, so when Fourth Monkey was coming out, HarperCollins, it was HMH back then, they sent out advance copies to all these big name authors, hoping to get a quote to put on the front cover of the book. And Patterson was one of the guys who got a copy of it. So he actually called me. I was sitting there working, and I got a phone call from Palm Beach, and I thought it was somebody that I knew because we used to live down there. I pick it up, and he's like, "Hey, it's Jim Patterson. You got a second?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure it is." But he starts talking and goes into his review of the book, and I realized this might actually be him. And then we just started chatting. We went into, my history as a book doctor and a ghostwriter. He told me what he liked about the book. He told me everything I did wrong in the book. And I realized that I could really learn from this guy, if he's in my life. So it made sense from a lot of different levels to work together. And we've had so much fun. I mean, it was originally going to be just that one book. I think we're on book 6 or 7 now. We both like working with each other.
Yeah. Is there like a specific theme that you find yourself, I guess, returning to in each of your stories, or do you try to make each novel, I guess, feel different from something that, like, from the last one, or
Yeah, I go out of my way to try and avoid the same thing. One of the things that really scared me at the beginning of this, when I was working behind the scenes, I saw a lot of big name authors who would write a book, it would hit really well, and then that publisher would want that same book but different, over and over again, that same story but different. I hate to pick on Lee Child, but like if you think of the Reacher books, they're fantastic, but like he had to write another Reacher book every year, and like I didn't want to get stuck on that particular hamster wheel. So every one of my stories is very different from the last. So I'll pick up, some particular topic, kind of use it for the one book, and then I'm done with it. I'll move on to something else. I try to find something totally different again. Because as a reader, that's the kind of stuff I want to read. I don't want to read the same story over and over again, even if it's a favorite author. I want them to surprise me. So I try to surprise them.
Yeah. Were there any like big lessons that you took away, or, techniques or ideas that from James Patterson working in collaborative works that you kind of saw yourself do more towards your solo projects?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, initially, I was a pantser, and he was a notorious outliner. So when we wrote Coast to Coast Murders, our very first book, I actually convinced him to pants a novel, which is unheard of at the time. But we finished it up, and then he sent me an outline for a book called The Noise, and we wrote the second one based on an outline. And I actually saw how much more efficient that process was. So I've been outlining my books ever since. So he actually brought me into the outlining camp. But he's constantly just dropping these little tidbits of wisdom on me. When we were writing Coast to Coast Murders, for example, there's a scene that I wrote for that. It was a dinner scene. So all the characters are sitting around, they're having dinner. We need to get certain points across in the conversation. And to me, that made the most sense. That was the easiest place for me to do it. I've got them all together. So I wrote up the scene. I sent it in to him. He called me like 10 minutes later. He's reading it. He's like, "Is there any reason we can't just say they had dinner, 3 words, and then take these 2 sentences and put them over here?" And he was right, because it sped up the pacing. It got rid of all the slower portions of that scene were now gone. So I constantly look at these different things that I write. Can something be replaced with "they had dinner"? A lot of times as a writer, I need to see a whole scene play out. I need to see them having dinner. I need to see food being passed around the table. I need to see the conversation. But that's not necessarily the important part. And if you think about it as a movie, like what can you edit out of that scene? What's the actual drill down? What do you need to see? One of the other things that he taught me, as an author, when you write a chapter, we try to create a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's a subconscious thing. Our brain wants to have some type of finality at the end of that particular chapter. But if you're writing a thriller, that's the opposite of what you want. You don't want closure. You want something that's going to force them to have to turn that page to figure out what happens next. So a lot of times on a second draft for a book, I'll go back through and I'll take out the end of every chapter. I'll take out the last sentence. I'll take out the last paragraph, whatever I need to snip out of there that basically turns it from closure into something that forces them to have to turn the page in order to get to that, the answer to whatever it is they're asking. It's the simplest thing in the world to do. When you think about it, it makes perfect sense, but very few authors do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's curious. I'm curious about, he obviously writes, and I've written screenplays and stuff, but I'm wondering, is there any part where you're just sitting there? I know you have an outline, so you have a basic understanding of how the story should flow, but you sit there and you write a piece for a scene, or even get to a point of the book and you're just like, I don't even know if this idea is going to work anymore.
That happens a lot. More so when I was pantsing a novel, because you've got this great idea for the overall arching idea, but then you need to get from A to Z, and you got to somehow fill up everything in the middle. So a lot of times that idea plays out in the first couple of chapters, and you don't know where to go with it. So that's one of the things that I actually like about the outlining process, because you can take that outline and you can continue to tweak it. If you're pantsing a novel, you might get 50,000 words in before you realize it's not working, and then you've got a lot of work to do to go back and try to fix it. If you're on an outline and you're doing the same thing, you can say, well, this character sucks. You can pull them out in 5 minutes. You can combine these things. You can shuffle these scenes around. You can do this. You can make it incredibly tight before you actually start writing the book. And a lot of people have told me that they don't outline because they feel that takes the enjoyment out of the writing process. Then they get the enjoyment writing the outline, but then they're done with it. They don't want to go back and write the book because now all of a sudden it becomes work. One of the things that Jim also taught me is to keep that outline dynamic. So that's always relevant. So if you're writing chapter 3, chapter 4, or whatever, and you come up with a new idea that you want to tweak, go through, update the entire outline based on that new idea, keep that dynamic, and then write the book and keep chasing it. Because when I initially tried outlining, I didn't realize that you needed to do that particular step. So I would create an outline for the whole book. I would start writing the book. I'd get to maybe chapter 2 or chapter 3. The outline goes over here. I'm going off over here. Before you know it, you throw the outline aside and it's no longer part of the process. But if you keep it dynamic and you change it as you go, it becomes an integral piece.
Interesting. So moving on, we saw that your novel it's Dracul, right? That's how you pronounce it. We saw it's in development at Paramount. First of all, congratulations. That's awesome. But I just want to know, like, when you find out that something that you wrote is going to be portrayed on the screen, are you excited or are you like a little nervous? Maybe it's not, going to be the same. I know, like Stephen King, he famously hated The Shining, right? The movie. So, is that like a concern at all? Or are you just like, I am so excited that this is it's going to be on screen. It's going to be,
It's a very weird thing. I've got 8 different projects in what I call various stages of Hollywood hell. They're all different. They're all moving in different ways. But my first experience with it was actually with Fourth Monkey. And one of my first phone calls was with Ron Howard's company. So it was Ron Howard and his partner, in a conference room, and I'm on speaker with these guys, and they start telling me everything they've got to take out of the book in order to get it under 2 hours, and create a compelling story. And it's not the same story, when you do that. And that kind of freaked me out a little bit. In today's world, the exact opposite has happened. Like Fourth Monkey's been optioned over and over again. It just got optioned again by a company that's doing it as a streaming series. And I'm really excited because the people behind it are fantastic. But what I like about streaming is, now they can take the Fourth Monkey, they can drag it out into 8 or 9 or 10 episodes. They can not only tell the whole story, they're looking for material that I took out because they want to tell a different story from what's actually in the book. So from my standpoint, I prefer the series stuff over the feature films. But, as an author, you've got very little control over that. Like I'm an executive producer on everything. That's more or less a paper title. They're not calling me, asking me what to do. They've got their own people, their own machine in place. And like the author just trips it up and gets in the middle of it. They don't want us anywhere near these projects. The only time that I've ever gotten involved, Ridley Scott's company optioned A Caller's Game. And at one point they asked me if I wanted to write the screenplay. And I told them I've never written a screenplay before. I don't know how to do it. They said, well, give it a try. Let's see what happens. So my movie ended up being 4.5 hours long because, like when I wrote the book, I took out all the parts that didn't need to be there. So in my mind, everything in that book needs to be on the screen. I couldn't figure out what else to take out to get it underneath that. So obviously, we can't film a 4.5 hour movie. So that got shelved. And this was a couple of years ago. Now, the funny thing is because the industry has changed, now they've come back to it. Folks like Netflix, they look at that and say, well, we'll just do it as 3 episodes. It's no big deal anymore. So everything's got a new life. But like every time my film agent calls me, it's always a roller coaster. It's either really bad news or really good news. A Caller's Game, we had gotten a phone call once that Jennifer Garner liked it. So Jennifer Garner signed on. She had what's called a first look deal with Netflix. And all of a sudden we've got Jennifer Garner, we've got Netflix. They're basically throwing $100 million around as the budget number for the movie. All these things played out in about 2 weeks. And then about a week after that, we got another phone call. Jennifer Garner has to back out because of a scheduling conflict. So all of a sudden Jennifer Jennifer Garner goes away, Netflix goes away, $100 million goes away, and we're right back to where we started from. So like that roller coaster is essentially every experience I've had with every one of my books in Hollywood. 8 of them are under option right now. Nothing has been filmed. I'm sure sooner or later something will be. It's a numbers game in my mind. I'm just going to keep writing the books, and hopefully I'll see one of them on the screen at one point. But it's stressful.
Yeah, we're kind of going through that ourselves on the opposite side of your position. We just recently purchased a screenplay or someone's actually script story.
Yeah, really quick. We're a production company, so we do we have a podcast, but we also do short horror films. So some people, they write short film scripts, and then they'll send them to us, and then we'll try to make those into movies. And we've done it 3 times now, and we're working on another one. We have a director that's just on call all the time. But yeah, continue.
Yeah. Anyway, so we purchased his script, and we loved the story. And we're like, this is really good writing. Let's see what we can do with it. And we're talking through with it, our director, and we're kind of like, there's some things we might have to change to make it fit the screen a little bit. And it's like, you don't want to take away someone's voice, but it's also, you do have to make it play out on a screen a certain way to actually get the audience involved and kind of make them drawn into the world, It's a hard battle, I think, because you just don't want to take away someone's voice, which can also screw them in the long run too.
I will say, we don't completely change a script, which I know that
we're not
happens
completely
in Hollywood.
changing the story. We're just tweaking things to make it play out on the screen better. But it's interesting being on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think, if you really take a step back, the only thing that belongs to me is the book itself, like those words. Even when an audiobook narrator gets a hold of it and does a narration, now all of a sudden it's that person's take on the book, so it's already different. Yeah. So when you sign a film or a TV deal, like you have to be ready to just hand your baby off, wish it goodwill, and kind of step away because it's really completely out of your control.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going back to Dracul, we saw that Andy Muschietti is the director for the project. And, he's done some of our favorite things, including It and Welcome to Derry, which we love. Mm-hmm. What's it like having someone pretty established on your project?
It's a crazy feeling. The way that played out is, my agent sent Dracul out to the publishers on a Friday, and she told them that she said, "I'm going to be accepting bids on Monday." Like we knew this was going to go to auction, so the editors only had a couple of days to read it. So she created that kind of fire. But we had a film agent who was doing the same thing on the Hollywood side. So like that Saturday, I wrote that book with Dacre Stoker, who's Bram's great grandnephew. Our agent called us and she's like, "Listen, I need you guys in New York on Monday. Can you do that?" So he hopped on a plane. I got on a train, and we ended up going to New York, and we had, I think, 5 or 6 different publishers that wanted the book. And in between those meetings, we were in the Uber rental car thing talking to the film studios. So it was just one after the other. When they threw Paramount and Andy Muschietti out there, we were so excited for the same reasons that you just brought up. Paramount's obviously huge. Andy Muschietti was huge at the time, still is. So it made perfect sense. But this was a couple of years ago. So let me tell you how that played out. They ended up keeping it for, I think, 6 years. They just kept re-upping that option. So they optioned a lot of stuff for Andy. So whenever Andy finished a project, he basically looked at his very long list and said, okay, I'm going to work on that one next. And if Dracul was on that list, but if he didn't pick it, that means it just stayed on that list. It meant that nobody else could touch it. Nobody else could make it. And they kept paying for that right over and over again to keep it there for Andy. So honestly, it tied up the book for a very, very long time. They've since let it go. About 2 years ago, they let the option expire. So now it's out there in the free market again, and it's being developed as a streaming series by somebody else. You never know, like we thought, if Andy had been on board with it from the beginning, like I should have had a conversation with Andy, like, are you likely to make this if we sign on this dotted line? But at the time I was still new to this. I wasn't willing to have that conversation. Today I would pick up the phone in a heartbeat, before I signed that paperwork.
Jeez, it just sounds like Hollywood is just a disaster.
It's crazy. I mean, I'm thinking about starting my own production company, just so I can control some of these pieces. Yeah. I recently wrote do you remember Flatliners?
Yeah, of course.
from the 90s. So the guy who wrote it, his name's Peter Filardi. He was actually one of the writers for Dracul. So we got to know each other really well. And I told him, listen, if you ever get the rights back for this, I've got an idea to reboot the Flatliners franchise. He called me about 2 years ago and he's like, hey, I just got the rights back from Columbia if you want to do it. So we wrote a book to reboot the film franchise. So we have a novel that's coming out that we are now shopping to Hollywood in order to get the film side of it going. But I've got very specific people that I want working on this particular film. And the only way that I can dictate that is if my production company actually puts it together, which isn't as daunting or crazy or scary as, it seems from the outside, once you understand all the pieces. So I'm leaning in that direction. So rather than handing this project off to somebody else, and wishing it good well, like I did with some of the other ones, I might take it on my own and try to get it done.
Nice. That's a big reason why we started our production company too, is to help the small creator and to be in control of everything that we're doing. Yeah,
we started this podcast and Jake and I, it's so funny because we watch horror movies together and stuff. And it's just so interesting how our conversations after the horror movies, they would go on for hours. And then it was just why don't we just talk about this on a podcast? So we started to do it, and we realized how hard it was to actually get, people to watch it at first. And, now that we have a pretty decent following, it's growing and stuff. We're we want to help other creators get that, get their project and stuff out in front of the audience that we're building. So we're trying to build a little community, I guess, of people who just love horror. And I think that, I don't know. It's cool.
But creatives in general are very good at the whole pay it forward thing. I've noticed that, the people that have helped you out, you're probably helping them out. I meet a lot of people and I make sure I take down everybody's name, everybody's contact info, because you never know when they're going to need something or where I might need something from them. But we're all willing to lean on each other, which I think is fantastic. And there's very few industries where you see that happen.
I would agree. Yeah. It's cool. So I do want to move on to some more spooky stuff. I basically on the show, as I said, Jake is more of the skeptic. So when we talk about, ghosts and stuff, he's like, it could just be the wind. And then I'm like, it's a ghost, dude. So I basically, do you believe in any of that stuff? Or are you just you just love the thriller kind of horror vibe?
I'm smart enough to understand there's a lot I don't understand, so I'm willing to go into everything with an open mind. My wife and I, we stayed at the Stanley Hotel, which is the basis for The Shining. And, they will tell you that place is haunted. Every corner's got a little story. And we were there for almost a week. We were waiting for something to happen. Nothing happened. I was in the basement with other horror authors, reading scary stories at midnight next to the boiler, waiting for something. Nothing happened. The very last night, my wife and I are there. We wake up in the morning. We're just laying in bed trying to figure out what we're going to do with the day. And all of a sudden the bed just starts to shake. And it was somebody grabbed it and was just completely just rattling. We couldn't figure out what was doing it. There was no noise. It was just moving like that. It was just vibrating. I'm looking over the side trying to figure out what it was. It did it for about a minute and then it just stopped. So we went downstairs and I told the manager and he's like, oh yeah, the bed in that room just does that. No explanation. So I don't know if that was a paranormal haunted thing or not. There's this house that my haunted house story is based on. I got tons of stories that I learned from locals. They've got almost 400 years worth of history on this particular house. At one point, the island was used as a yellow fever quarantine zone. So if you got yellow fever in the New England area, they shipped you out to that island and you weren't allowed to leave unless you got better. And nobody got better. So a lot of people died out there. During the Spanish-American War, they would capture vessels and they would dock them out there and they'd keep everybody on the boat until everybody either died from starvation or disease, and then they would take the boat because that's all they really wanted. All these bodies would go overboard to feed the sharks. So a lot of people died on this particular island where this house is built. And I've since had a lot of paranormal investigators out there to the house to look for stuff. And the general consensus is when somebody dies or something dies, energy is just dissipated. It doesn't just disappear, it just moves from point A to point B. So if a lot of things die in one particular particular spot, it's almost like a battery where it just takes all this stuff on like a charge. I remember the first time I was actually at the house, it was before I knew anything at all about the history. I was standing in the middle of it and like the hair on the back of my neck was standing up. Like I wanted to get out. Like something instinctively was telling me you do not want to be here. And I don't know what that was. And I think, as humans, I think we've kind of trained that instinct out of ourselves over the years. Like if you're in a room like this, you've got a cat next to you and there's a noise in the corner, that cat is going to bolt. It's going to be gone. It doesn't care what made the noise. It's just gone. It'll figure it out later. People are stupid. We will get up. We will walk over to the corner. We'll get the flashlight out. We'll try to figure out what it was. Back in caveman days, that would get you killed. So I think like we have learned to ignore that particular instinct. So I guess the roundabout way of answering this is I do think there is something out there. I don't think we have any clue what it actually is. I think we'll figure it out sooner or later. But we have to keep an open mind to it.
Yeah, that's why the cliche of people going towards noises in horror movies is just so funny because I know I do it too.
So would
I probably would. Yeah. In real life,
Like,
that's
what is
exactly
that?
what I would do.
Who's at my door?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's funny this year on the show. What we've done is we're adding like ghost hunting to our like, I don't know, our channel. So we're actually going to certain haunted places and doing the episode at the location. And then we're doing a little vlog with all the, ghost equipment and stuff like that. And we just did this one down in Canyon City, Colorado. It's like this old prison that's not a thing anymore. It's but it's so funny. We did this episode and like all these like abandoned cells are just behind us. So it's this dark hallway and stuff. And I actually think at the end of the episode, we hear just like this loud bang. Like I can't hear anything outside of these headphones, but we heard it and we both were like, the heck was that? And it's I don't know.
Yeah, that whole experience was kind of pretty eye-opening for me because even being a skeptic, I was open to the idea that there's a possibility. And going there and experiencing and listening to what I actually heard in our recordings, I was like, I'm speechless.
Yeah. But
you just never know. I mean, when they were building the house on this little island, I talked to some of the construction workers and they swore like they were renovating the original house. It used to be a Coast Guard life-saving station. And they swore that they heard voices on the second floor, like while they were working downstairs and there was nobody upstairs. There were lockers up there and bunk beds. Like that's where the Coast Guard used to stay. But like they swore they would hear voices. Yeah. And I believe them. I mean, these are guys that have no reason to lie. Like people look at them a little funny just for telling the story, so they're going out of their way just to say it. And the fact that they're willing to communicate that, knowing that they're going to get a little pushback, that to me says there's some truth behind it.
Yep, exactly. So on this show, we've also looked at, some unsolved mysteries and some true crime and things like that. And when we do the research for those, I mean, there's certain things that we read that just like, makes the hair on our arms stand up, And so I basically want to know, like, when you're researching stuff, certain things for a book, or maybe you've written something and then like, it's just so freaky that you're like, ooh, yeah, that's creepy. I mean, is there any time that you've done that when researching for a book or something like that?
Well, I interviewed a lot of serial killers or killers in general for the Fourth Monkey series when I was writing that. Nice. Heard a lot of stuff I wish I could unhear. Scary things, I pick up a lot, just being in Portsmouth, like we literally have ghost tours, like there are people that here that will take you on a tour of haunted spots around the area. I love doing that kind of thing. And, picking up little things here or there. And it's always the weirdest stuff that gets you. Even like on this island where this house is, like there are people that swear they've seen a little girl out on the beach. Like the description of her is always the same. Like they always describe the same girl, same outfit and stuff like that. And these are people that don't know each other. And a lot of time they're tourists, so they're just passing through. So they've got no reason to even know that there's a local, lore about that. And like those kind of things, when they all click, that's where, it gets me. When I wrote Dracul, I had access to all of Bram Stoker's notes. He spent almost his entire life researching vampires. Like we found notes dating all the way back to when he was 16 years old, and he didn't write Dracula until he was 43. So he had a lot of time in between there. But he researched vampires all around the world, and he found vampire lore in virtually every culture that existed around the planet. And a lot of times that lore existed before people actually started traveling and talking to each other. So they would find a pocket over here, they've got a vampire story. There's people over here have a vampire story. They don't speak the same language. They're not talking to each other, but they both have that same story. So that makes you wonder, like, it has to be based on some type of factual element in order for it to be real, in order for them both to be talking about it. And that kind of stuff scares me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like people have only been around for 400,000 years on a planet that's been here for a couple of billion. We don't know shit.
Exactly. That's how I feel
true.
about aliens. I'm serious.
Yeah.
They got, you see all the old, like the art, from all these different cultures, and they all have like some being coming from the sky and stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's an alien. I don't
Yeah, it is crazy.
We're getting ready to send somebody to Mars.
Yeah.
Like how different is that?
Right, exactly. Yeah,
It's the
we're
same
just
thing.
an alien to another
Some Martian
planet.
pointing up at the sky going, what the hell is that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Does writing, stories on haunted houses or experiences, how does that differ from, a story that pops up in your head?
Well, I think they all writing is very weird to me. It's almost like watching a movie that's played out in my head and I'm just writing it down as fast as I can. Like when it's firing on all cylinders, it's just like that. Like I don't know what the characters are going to do next. I don't know where the story is going. I'm just writing it all down. So whether I base it on something in reality or I research it ahead of time, it really doesn't factor into it a whole lot. It just makes those visuals, I think, are just a little more clear.
Mm-hmm. Get that. Yeah. So yeah, I think the next thing is obviously you have a new novel coming out, right? The First Scarlet Door. And that is a prequel to the Fourth Monkey series, correct?
It is, and this was I had a really hard time explaining to the folks at Amazon how to rank this in their system because it comes like the story itself takes place after Six Wicked Child, but it's a prequel. So and from a numbering standpoint, we've got Fourth Monkey, Fifth to Die, Sixth Wicked Child. Now I'm going back to first, so like it seems like it belongs before those. So when I wrote those, I had to write them in a very specific way. So you can read the original trilogy and then go back and read the prequels and it's going to make perfect sense. Or you can read them all in order and it's going to make a different kind of sense. But I had to make sure that it worked on each of those levels. A lot of people have pointed out that I've Star Wars the whole thing.
I was just going to
Think about Star Wars. You got Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. Then they went back and did the 3 prequels. That's essentially what I'm doing here.
So was this plan all planned out? Or did you just
No,
kind of think about
not
it?
at all. I mean, initially Fourth Monkey was a standalone. I just wanted to write a serial killer novel and then I was done with it. But my agent called me when she started shopping it and she had so much attention. She's like, do you have any ideas for a follow-up? So I scribbled out an idea for a second one and then we ended up selling it, in a 2-book deal. And I wasn't done with the story after 2 books. So I ended up doing a third and just rounding out the trilogy. I left it after that, but I've been all over the world and this is just one of those things. People put this book down in front of me. They want to know more. They want to know what's going on with these characters. They want to know his origin story. They feel that if you read the books, a lot of it is told through diary entries when the killer is young. Right. They want to know, what happens next in that particular story, not just the modern day stuff. So I'm trying to satisfy that. It felt done to me until one day it just didn't anymore. And, I think Sam Porter's always been kind of in the corner of my office tapping his shoe. He has more to say.
Yeah. Do you, when writing these books, do you have a sort of feeling or common feeling throughout them that you want the reader to feel? Is it the weight of just horror or fear, or what are you kind of feeling?
I think there's a certain vibe there. I don't know that I necessarily try to create it intentionally, but it's definitely there. Like when I was writing the prequels, I did nothing but listen to the audiobooks for the trilogy that I had already written, over and over again, because I wanted to make sure that story was always fresh in my head. And the nice thing about the way I did the prequels this time, I wrote them during COVID. I didn't tell anybody I was working on them. So I was able to write all 3 books before anybody saw them, so I could, if I came up with an idea for the first prequel, when I was writing the 3rd prequel, I could go back and adjust the first 2 books and basically completely fine tune that whole storyline before I put it out there. Because there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, the original trilogy has got a lot of intricate pieces to it. I needed to make sure that these all tied into that, but did it in a way that completely takes the entire story and flipped it on its head again, to keep the reader interested. I can't just tell the same story again. I have to do it in a way that makes them question everything they've already read. So there was a lot of moving parts involved. Made my head hurt quite a bit.
Well, we're excited to read it. So.
Definitely. So I guess other than that novel coming out, is there anything else that you're working on, or Anything?
I've got a bunch of co-authored titles. Patterson's got me on the whole co-authoring thing, so I've been bringing in other writers and doing that. Got a couple new books coming out with Patterson. I'm not sure what the next one is dropping, probably pretty soon. But I think my next major release, though, is going to be for Scarlet Door in September.
Awesome.
Perfect. Yeah, can't wait.
Cool.
Yeah, I think we're good.
All good?
Yeah. No, it's been great. Thanks for being on the show. It's been fascinating to learn kind of the long history behind your whole career. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, it's been fun. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, cool. On that note, take care, and we'll talk to you soon and let you know kind of when we're going to release this. It's going to be like our second episode of the season. So
yeah, it should be April 22nd or something like that.
Somewhere around there.
We'll let you know.
Well, if you tag me on social media, my people will share it all over the place for you.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Sweet.
All right. Thank you so much for your
Thanks
time.
again.
Thanks, guys.
Yep.
All
See
right,
ya.
Take care.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with JD. That was a blast.
Yeah. Super fun, super informative.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you are a
Very
inspiring-
seasoned, experienced guy.
yeah, I would say so. Honestly, the life experiences that he's had, that it's so cool to see another success story of somebody that is maybe going through what you guys might be going through, maybe what we've gone through for sure. But it's cool to see the whole philosophy of no plan B coming back into.
I know it.
Yeah. So,
well, JD, thank you again. Guys, I hope you enjoy, and we'll see you around the graveyard. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Supernaturals. Be sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platforms. See you around the graveyard.